All right, guys, today we're talking with a seasoned missionary. He and his wife are serving with Ethnos 360. They are mission mobilizers, and they get to travel around to different venues, speak to audiences of different sizes about the need to engage the unreached in this world with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, we get to hear his background. He was actually started off as a truck driver, and his wife was a dental assistant. And then the Lord called them into full-time missions, and they served in Papua New Guinea. So we get to hear his experiences and his stories. It's really great. You're not going to want to miss that. We're talking to Tim Carmichael today. My name is Mike Tapia.
And I'm Cody Hall.
This is the Go and Send podcast.
Tim Carmichael, what is your current role with Ethnos 360?
Ooh, my current role with Ethnos 360. So I'm a mobilizer for Ethnos 360. Within the mission, we're called reps, representatives. But in mission circles, they would consider us to be mobilizers.
Sure. And I know I've been following kind of your all's ministry for years now, since hearing you speak at our church and thinking about Facebook. You guys are on the road a lot. I mean, you're walking, you're driving around, you're presenting, Ethnos 360, you're engaging at churches. I was thinking in your travels and your speaking engagements, what would be kind of your main message that you're trying to communicate as you engage with God's people?
So the main message changes all the time according to the place that I'm at, the audience that I'm speaking to, their light level, their age level, all of that sort of thing. So that kind of changes from time to time.
Yeah.
But basically, in a nutshell, what we're doing is we're trying to get people to take the next step, like whatever that looks like. So oftentimes, we'll go into a place and we'll present the need. We always use scripture to present the need for missions, right? And we try to educate and encourage the church. And what I mean by that next step is our hope and prayer is in the dialogue that we have together, if it's like one-on-one or a small group, or it could be a Sunday morning preaching the whole message. The goal is to see people take that next step. So for a lot of people, the next step might just be realizing that they're hearing for the very first time that there are entire people groups, language groups who haven't heard the gospel, right? Like that happened to me. Missionary came to my church when I was a kid, and it kind of kicked off this whole missions thing for me because it was the first time that I heard that there's entire languages. Like the concept of there being people who haven't heard of Jesus, I understand that, right? Like we could walk through this town and find a lot of people that don't know anything at all about Jesus.
Yeah.
But the idea that you could have an entire language of people, a people group who haven't had a chance to hear only because of the place where they live and the language that they speak.
Yeah.
For me, that was unfair. I was like, how can that possibly be? It's like 1990 something. And, how can we have it that far away from Christ's command to go and make disciples of all the languages? How do we still have those language people, those language groups who haven't had a chance to hear, right? So for some people, that might be their next step. The next step for them is a realization that the job hasn't been finished yet. In fact, we're a long way away from it, right? And the idea that there's entire people groups who haven't heard yet, that boggles a lot of people's mind. They have a hard time understanding that because a lot of times we think, oh, well, the gospel's gone all around the world, right? Like you go to a church and they'll have a big map and there'll be a pin in every country, yes. Right? Well, within each one of those countries, there can be scores of different languages who still haven't heard, even though there's a church within that country somewhere, right? So that might be somebody's next step. But also you might come across somebody whose very next step means going to do something about it, right? And there's all those little steps in between, from hearing about it for the first time and realizing, oh, wow, this is still a thing that we need to finish. And then for some people, their very next step might be, hey, we're going to go and do something about it.
Yeah, and you say that too. There's so many people who haven't heard the gospel, and in my mind, I'm like, sometimes the numbers just don't stick in my head. But What is the scope of that task? Do you remember that, like the size of how many languages are we talking about? How many people group are we talking about that don't know Christ?
Yeah. So here's one of the big problems. I am not a number guy.
Yeah.
In fact, like usually usually at this point, I go into trying to explain. I've got this. I've got this thing with numbers. I can't keep them in order. They flip flop all around. Like seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. So I'm not going to remember those numbers. I do know that it's thousands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
And-
scope is just like, wow, just like
Yeah.
that many people. Like, I think it's like billions of people,
Billions,
right? Billions
Yeah,
of
it'd be
people.
billions of people, but thousands of languages.
Thousands of
Exactly.
languages.
Yeah,
exactly.
Billions of people
There's
haven't
about
heard them.
7,000 languages spoken on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Our organization, Ethnos 360, we probably close to 2,000 languages that we would send missionaries to
Yeah.
if we had them.
Wow. Wow. So just giving people that scope, like you're in these churches, many of these people aren't even probably thinking about missions on the day to day. They're probably consumed with something else and they're just not thinking about it, and kind of give that wake up call like, hey,
Yeah.
the task is unfinished. There are people out there dying without Christ who don't even have the opportunity to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much what we do. We consider our ministry, our job, our work, and when I mean I'm talking about me and Joan,
Yeah.
is to educate and encourage the local church to be involved in some way. And we don't know what that's going to look like. That's between them and the Lord. The Lord has a different path for everybody.
Yeah.
But we want to be encouraging. We want to help educate them, give them what they need to move forward in whatever way they choose to go. Sure. But we would love to have every Bible believing church being involved in some way in getting the gospel to these languages who haven't had a chance to hear yet.
Yeah.
Amen. And that's powerful. And you mentioned earlier in your childhood, kind of that first eye-opening experience where a missionary came to your church.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about that. What happened there?
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So I was in junior high, and I remember sitting in the back corner of the church, and we had a missionary come to visit that day. And this is great. I don't know what it was like when you guys were growing up in church, but missionary days were awesome because a lot of times you got to watch a video, right? Now this was back when video was like a special thing, right? Like the missionary. I remember him pushing out this big cart. You guys know what an AV cart is? Are you guys old enough for that?
Sure. It's got like a
Yes.
projector on it. Got some
Well,
slides on it.
yeah,
or something.
there was like projectors. There were missionaries that would come with their slides that like and this
yes,
big
the
round,
click.
and there'd
Yes.
always be one upside down. You'd have to flip it around. And I mean, there was no YouTube, there was no smartphone, so you didn't see a whole lot of videos or pictures from other places. So that was kind of cool. But this one missionary in particular, Dave Myers is his name, and he was a missionary with New Tribes Mission at the time, and our church supported him. And he came back to our church to visit, and he pushed out the AV cart with a big square television with fake wood on the side, and put a you know what a VCR is?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
The VHS tapes.
Yeah,
slipped in
VHS
there.
tapes. Yeah. All my homeschool friends are going to know exactly what those are. All right. So he puts in a VHS tape of a video called E-Tau. And it's the story of how this particular people group in Papua New Guinea came to Christ. And so it starts out talking about this man who was a farmer in Pennsylvania, and found out that there were people who hadn't had a chance to hear the gospel yet, and he wanted to do something about it. And it's the story of him and his family moving to Papua New Guinea, moving into a tribe, building a house, learning to speak their language, and then introducing them to the God of the Bible, the God of creation who made everything. And then starting out in Genesis and teaching chronologically through the Old Testament. Not starting with Jesus, but starting where the book begins in Genesis 1:1, right? So he starts out there and he lays out this whole story of God's interaction with man, right? And it was amazing. It was something I'd never seen before. I I never realized that there were still people that were living in those kind of conditions, like as a junior hire, I would have thought of it as like a primitive type situation, but these guys are way out in the jungle, and it blew my mind, right? So as a junior hire, like that was crazy to me. Like, first of all, it was awesome because the whole tribe ends up coming to Christ. But the biggest thing for me was like, I couldn't believe that there were still at that time I was thinking of it as a village, but it's actually a people group. There's multiple villages within this language group. But my junior high mind was just focused on that village. I was like, I can't believe there's like a whole group of people living out there in the jungle, and they've never had a chance to hear this. Like that didn't seem fair to me, right? Even as a junior hire, I'm like, okay, so we're in 1990 something, so 1,990 something years you know what I mean? Like, we've got, thinking about all the different versions of the Bible that we have in English and how the gospel's gone to all of these places, but it hadn't gone to these people yet, right? And so there was this, as a younger person, you have a heightened sense of what's fair and what's not. Like, we're passing out candy in class and you don't get the same amount that these guys do. Like, that's not fair, right? So for me, it was this sense of unfairness. Like, how can we have all these missionaries being sent out, and yet these people hadn't ever heard until that guy came and reached their tribe. So anyway, that was me in junior high, and a lot of it was like the idea of the adventure of it and being in a jungle and that sort of thing. It blew my mind. I thought, this is amazing. This is awesome. This is so cool. But also, the same time that I was having this thought of, man, that would be so cool to do something like that, there was this feeling in me that there's absolutely nothing that I would ever be able to do to do like what that guy in that video did, right? Or to do what the missionary Dave Myers does, right? Because I'm not saying this was intentional. This was probably just something that I worked up in my own head, that there's like this hierarchy in the church, right? And like in our local church here, you've got the teaching pastor, right? And he knows everything about the Bible, and he's able to study and present that to us, and that's amazing, right? And then there's youth pastor, and he's a lot of fun to hang out with, and he knows a lot about the Bible too, and he's also fun, and he leads the youth group, and you want to be like him when you grow up, and all that kind of stuff. And you can go, like on down the list. Like with our church, it would be like, then you've got like deacons, and you've got the guys that collect the offering, you've got the Sunday school teachers, and the guy driving the bus, and the secretaries, and the janitor, and all that kind of stuff. But up here's the pastor, right? But even higher and bigger and more important than the pastor were these strange people that would come and visit the church every once in a while, right? Missionaries. And sometimes they'd show up and they'd be in like their homemade African shirts or something, or they'd all look the same, and the kids would be in the same shirts and stuff like that. Or they'd be talking about their ministry in India, and they were amazing, right? Like, if the pastor's way up here, missionaries are like all the way up here somewhere, right? Like they walk just a couple of inches off the ground when they walk up on the stage. The sky parts, the clouds part, and, the ray of sunshine comes down on them, like that's how I felt. I was like, oh man, those are like very special spiritual people. Like they're, they've got God on speed dial, like if they had speed dial back then. Anyway, that's what I thought about those people, right? And the thing is, I knew what was in my heart, and I knew, man, there's no way I could never do anything like that. Like, there's no way God could ever use me. Like, all the things that I've done and the things that I think about and all of that kind of stuff, I thought, there's no way that I could ever be good enough, smart enough, faithful enough to do any of the kind of things that those missionaries were doing in the places where they lived and worked all over the world, right? I grew up with a mom and a dad who kept missionaries' pictures on the fridge and would pray for them all the time. So missionaries were like out of my league. It was like, there's no way I could ever be a part of that. Maybe like on a short-term trip, but I could never be like the guy.
And that's super common. I think so many people feel that way. Like they see this, they hear these crazy stories. They're like, I can't go live in Papua New Guinea. I can't go, live in the, these rural villages in Africa. Like, and I'm not spiritually enough. Like I'm not good enough. I'm like, I don't know the Lord enough, or whatever weird lies they tell themselves, or the enemy tells them. But wow, that's great. So like, how do you work through that? Like, how do you come to
you suppress it. That's what I did. So this guy, Dave Myers, great guy. I'm where I am today because of him. I went and I got his card off the display table. In fact, it wasn't even a card; it was a business card. So it wasn't like the prayer card with a picture of the family. And I stuck that in my Bible, and it sat in my Bible for forever. And every now and then I'd flip through it and I'd see that and I'd be like, man, that would be so cool to do that someday. But, the Lord's not going to use somebody like me, right? Fast forward, and I married my high school sweetheart, who's right behind that camera over there. And we started life. I barely made it through high school. I got paroled from high school in 1993. Without ever graduating a math class. I never passed a high school level math class, which is how we actually met, Joan and I. I was in, sophomore? No, I was a sophomore in freshman algebra class, taking it for the second time. And I didn't want to be a junior taking freshman algebra class for the third time. So I thought, you know what, I need to get to know this person that sits behind me. And so, because we would take our tests and quizzes and pass them behind, and I said, I need to get to know this girl, and maybe she would help me cheat and get through this class. She never did. And then I ended up working for her dad. We had a very biblical type marriage. I worked for her dad on the farm for, I don't know, it was a long time. Was it 7 years? It feels like it could have been. It was a long time. It was all through high school. And then I got to marry one of his daughters and got the one I wanted.
Good, yes.
Which was awesome. Yeah. And we just started life. And so I was working on the farm for her dad, and Joan worked, you weren't in dentistry yet, or you were. Yeah. Yeah. So she was working in a dental office, and we had a house, we had kids, or a kid, and we were just living life. And we would get to the end of the week, and we'd have half a day free on Saturday because I worked half days on Saturday, worked all the rest of the week. Joan worked all the rest of the week. We'd have Sunday, and then Sunday night, and next thing you know, you wake up, it's Monday. And we start thinking, man, is this it? Like, is this going to be life, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to work on the farm. She's going to work at the dental office, and we're going to, every week is going to look the same for the next 30, 40 years. And we thought, man, there's got to be more than that, right? So we started looking for opportunities around the church, and we started volunteering, cleaning up brush in a big ditch, with chainsaws and stuff, and vacuuming the halls and setting up chairs for the church, and cleaning bathrooms, and just helping out all around the church. We ended up helping with the youth group. They put us in charge of 7th and 8th grade girls. I didn't know anything at all about 7th and 8th grade girls, and I would much rather clean the bathrooms.
This is kind of the drama years a little bit there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 7th and 8th grade girls are horrible people.
Oh, my.
So mean. And we'd take them on trips, and it's just, We were looking for ways that we could serve. And it was in the midst of that time when we were looking for something that we could do, and we had put ourselves in this category of, we'll just be helpers, right? Like we're not qualified to like actually teach a Bible lesson or anything. We're just willing to help out those people who are doing that, right? Mm-hmm. And at that time, that same missionary who had shown that video when I was in junior high, he came back and he stayed in our area for the whole summer to reconnect to his sending church. And our youth pastor said, hey, you know what? You should go talk to Dave. You should get used. You know that guy? He does some really cool stuff like all over the world. You should go and talk to him, right? Mm-hmm. He had no idea that I'd been holding this guy's prayer card for years, right? And so Dave, he said, hey, we're going to have a bunch of people over at the house that we're renting. Why don't you come out and have dinner with us, right? And I don't know if this was on purpose. It may have been. When we showed up, there was nobody else there. It was just us and his family. And we had a great time. He had this Yanomamo bow from South America with an arrow, and we did target practice with that. And then he plugged in this video. He's like, hey, have you ever seen this? And he plays, it's now a DVD, but he played a DVD version of the video that I saw when I was in junior high that made me cry. Yeah. And then he did something amazing. He told me, he said, Tim, do you realize, see, at this time, I worked for Joan's dad on the farm, and mostly I was driving a semi around Chicago delivering sod grass, right? And he said, Tim, do you realize we have people out there on the mission field whose job it is to buy all the supplies that the missionaries who are living way out in the middle of nowhere, all the supplies they need for the next 3 months. And then they load it up on a truck, and they drive over these crazy mountain roads to deliver those goods to the missionaries that need them, right? Well, I was a truck driver. And then he said, Tim, we've got guys whose job it is to go out in the jungle and to cut down a tree and then saw that tree up into boards and build a house for those missionaries. My dad operated a sawmill. Like, I've helped him tons of times. We built cabins that would have fit just perfectly out there in the jungle. And then he looks at Joan and he says, Joan, do you realize in Papua New Guinea right now, we have a dentist who would love to have an assistant like you to help him? And it was like God took all those barriers that I thought was in front of us. Like, oh, well, God can't use us. We're just normal people, right? And then all of a sudden I was like, you mean I could be driving a truck over in New Guinea someplace, or in Africa, or some kind of thing like that, or cutting down trees and turning them into lumber like I've helped my dad do? And so there was like this big, like, uh-oh moment where God had removed all the things that we thought were blocking us from being involved in doing something like that. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, the reality of people, different skills needed on the mission field, you know, because Cody and I were engineers. We didn't really go into engineering thinking we would go into missions either, you know, but then the Lord opens up that door. It's like, hey, actually, your skills can be used in missions to open doors for the gospel. And like, I love hearing that, like, because the reality is how many truck drivers are maybe a truck driver listens to this and they have no idea that, hey, skills can fit. Yeah. Your skills could fit in missions. Like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. God can use anybody.
Yeah. So you have that aha moment. You know, life doesn't always work immediately. Like, what goes off after that? Is it like right away? Like, sign me up. You took it right from Dave, and you said, I'm going to Papua New Guinea.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. So Dave was a great recruiter. He did leave out some vital information. So, and here it is. So so we used to be called New Tribes Mission. Now we're called Ethnos 360. At that time, we were still called New Tribes Mission. And New Tribes Mission has a Bible Institute and a missionary training school. They're two separate entities, 2 years of Bible school, and then 2 to 3 years of missions training. And Dave never mentioned that, right? So we were seriously considering missions, and the thing that made me more nervous than anything was having to go to college. I never saw that in my future. I didn't know anything about college, didn't know how to go to college, didn't know how to pay for it, but I did know that we needed at least 2 years of Bible, right? And the only reason I knew that was because I would get these magazines from the mission, and in the back it said, "Hey, if you want to be, you know, a candidate for missions, we need a minimum of 2 years of Bible," right? So we start looking for Bible schools, and we checked into the ones that like guys I grew up with in school and youth group and stuff who went to Bible school. Those were the only Bible colleges that I knew, right? Like, this was the early days of the internet, and I didn't have a computer to get on the internet anyway. So we started applying for schools. We actually went and visited this school in Chattanooga, and we told them we were coming down, and when we got there, all the offices were closed. I don't know who dropped the ball, but we wandered around campus. We had this little baby with us, and we didn't know where we were going to spend the night that night. And yeah, there some guys found us wandering, and I'm like, hey, is there like an office we can go to? Because I was supposed to visit the school that, and they're, oh no, we're shut down for 3 days. You know, it was like fall break or something. Anyway, and long story short, that door closed, and the other doors closed, and yeah, we ended up at a small little Bible college, a Southern Baptist Bible college in southeastern Kentucky. I didn't even know what a Southern Baptist was. I just thought, well, I grew up in a Baptist church, so these are Baptists in the South, which is pretty much what they were. But we went there we were going there for 2 years because that magazine said I needed 2 years at Bible school. So I'm sitting there with the guy. Believe it or not, he's a supporter of ours now and has been for 20-something years, Dr. Malcolm Hester. And he was arranging my classes. He's like, okay, so why are you here? And I said, because I'm going to be a missionary. He says, okay, so like what track are you going to be on? What are you studying? I said, I don't know. I just have to be here for 2 years. And he says, what do you mean you have to be here for 2 years? And I said, because I'm going to be a New Tribes missionary. And they said you have to be at a Bible school for 2 years. So I need to be here for 2 years. So that was how clueless I was about how everything worked, right? And so we were there for 2 years and ran out of money and couldn't continue. And we came back to Illinois and worked at the farm for a few more years. And then by that time, we had found out that New Tribes Mission had a Bible school that we should have started at if Dave Myers had told me that, but he didn't. But it worked out. And so we ended up going to, after going back to the farm to work for a while, for a few years, we made it up to to Jackson, Michigan, at the Bible Institute that New Tribes Mission had, and we were there for 2 years. And finished up the training there, and then about a year after that, or no, less than a year, we graduated, and then a few months later, we started at the New Tribes Mission School in England, and we finished the last part of our training over there. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, lots of preparation time there. I mean, you said, God opened doors, God closed other doors. Looking back, I mean, that preparation time through education, you said you were quite leery of that. Like, I'm not sure about this. What do you see that God did through that time, looking back? Because it was years investing in that, the learning, the scriptures, figuring all that out.
Yeah, all of that. What we learned was great. It was fantastic. But now that I'm at the age that I am, looking back, I think the best lessons that we learned there weren't lessons that were taught in class. They were lessons that I learned from teachers when they weren't teaching, just in conversation. The things that we learned as a couple, and I'm not to say that we didn't learn things in class, because every day, especially when we were at the New Tribe School, at the first school that I was at for 2 years, Joan wasn't able to take classes. Well, I mean, she could have, but we would have had to pay for it. So I'm coming home from class and I'm telling, you're not going to believe what this is amazing, and all these things that we're learning in class. And I try to share it with her, and it's just not the same thing, as being there. Whereas, when we made it up to the New Tribes Bible Institute, everyone was welcome in the classroom, right? So me and Joan sat there. We took class side by side. I remember the day. I don't remember what the class was, but I remember the day we were walking out of class, and she turns to me and she says, "We're going to have to do something about this." This being the need for the gospel to go to every language. She says the only way we could not be involved in some way is if we unlearned what we've just learned. Because everything that they explained to us was scriptural, that the God of creation wants to be known by every people group on planet Earth, every ethnos, every language group. Right? And we haven't gotten there yet. And there's still those who haven't heard. And Joan she summed it up. She's like, we would have to open our head and pull that part of knowledge out of our head in order to not be involved in some way. Whatever that looked like. we were still we were still of the mindset that, okay, so those magazines that I would get from New Tribes Mission, it would always say, we could use anybody. We were like a blue collar type mission. You don't have to have these big fancy degrees and all that. They just, if you're willing to go, we'll send you, right? So I had seen all of that, but also in the back of my mind, I thought every step along the way, I thought at some point somebody who's in charge at New Tribes would come up and be like, we say we could use anybody, but not you guys. I mean, thanks. We appreciate the effort, but I thought for sure there's no way. I mean, every step along the way as we kept going, it was like the door would open and I'm looking around and do I have permission to go through this door? Like, is this really? I'm going through this door. Everybody okay? All right, here we go. And then I'd walk through the door and nobody's kicked me out yet. Yeah. So it was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like during that time, like that's a lot of training and a lot of time leading up, and you guys know you want to go to the mission field. Was there ever like a time where you guys had to wrestle with that season of preparation, or were you guys pretty motivated through it, knowing where you were headed? Or how would you encourage somebody who's maybe in a season of preparation for missions?
Yeah, preparation is needed. Preparation is required. Yeah. Okay, so Joan always worked in dentistry. I would not go to a dentist who hadn't been trained to be a dentist. And I would want them to have very thorough dentistry training before they started working inside my mouth. I don't think it's enough to say, I really, really want to be a dentist. I have this fire in my heart. I know the Lord put it there, and He's going to see me through. For the type of missions that we do, talking about going into a place where their whole way of thinking is completely opposite of anything that we could understand, right? Speaking a language that has never been broken down by anybody from the outside. There's no dictionary. There's no Rosetta Stone to help you learn that language. No one has worked on a dictionary. Nobody has, no other outsider has notes on how to learn that language, right? You need specialized training in order to do the type of work that we do in the type of places where we work. And in fact, our training was even shortened. The reason we went to England, one, because England sounds kind of cool. They got castles and things like that.
Fish and chips or something, right?
Yeah, all of that, yeah. But the main reason we went there was because their training program was just a year, right? So it was a year of Bible and then a year of missions training. Whereas we were looking at, if we stayed in the States, it was going to be 2 to 3 years. And we were in a hurry because we thought, man, we're getting older, which is crazy to think because that was like 20-something years ago. And we wanted to get to the field as fast as we could. So we went over there. Yeah. And it ended up being great for us because we were the only American family that was going through training there. There were people from all over Europe and from Asia and from Australia and from Africa. We lived in a dorm where you're smelling all these different smells at dinner time as people are cooking their types of food, right? And it was just great. It was every school we've been to, there's usually somebody who's from some exotic place, and you're like, have you met so and so? They're from Malaysia. Wow, you should go talk to them. That was us. There were people that have you met the Carmichaels? They're Americans. And they're not that bad. So I would say get as much training as you possibly could. Yeah, because the things that you're taught in class are things you're going to need to know. But for us, the biggest lessons we learned were the lessons we learned as a husband and wife, as parents. We had another. We left to go to the first time I went to college. I was a dad and a husband, and along the way we had Jonas as well. And we had no money. I don't know how we did it, but the Lord provided, and we were able to just keep pressing through. And yeah, this guy who never thought he would ever go to college. Well, when you include community school, I went to school for like 6 years, 7 years. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I love that. And that angle of, the preparation is not only helpful, it's necessary.
It is
I think
necessary.
about what Paul wrote to Timothy, 2 Timothy 2, work hard to show yourself approved, that God can use you. So get familiar with the Word of God. Get familiar and learn skills that you're going to need to use on the front lines as you serve people. I also think about every person that you look at it in the Old Testament that God did something significant through, there's a documented period of preparation.
Yeah.
King David, he was a shepherd, right, for many, many years. Moses, before he led God's people out of Egypt, was a shepherd for 40 years.
Yeah.
There's a significant period of preparation there. Take us to that time in England and sort of finishing up there. You had Papua New Guinea in your sights at that point? Were you thinking you were going to go there? What was happening there?
Yeah. We had set our sights on Papua New Guinea, mostly because of that video I saw as a junior hire.
Yeah.
But also, they have some pretty cool pictures. And within our mission, our mission is still working in Guinea, Africa. And so the people in Guinea are all the time saying, hey, we're not even done with Old Guinea. Well, how come everybody's going to New Guinea? And I say, well, you need some better photographs because Papua New Guinea has some cool pictures. And, it was one of those places that I was always intrigued at, even before I caught the mission bug. And, some people kind of struggle and worry and stress. Where is it that the Lord wants me to go? I kind of want to go to this place because I like Asia, but I know there's this really big need over here. There's needs all over the world. And I don't remember who it was. It was a friend of ours who said, come on, like, go to Papua New Guinea if that's where you would like to go. And because it's not like the Lord's going to be like, oh no, Tim and Joan went to Papua New Guinea. I wanted them to go to Costa Rica. What am I going to do with the people in Costa Rica now, right? Like, that's not how the Lord works. So we had an interest in it. We thought, we never thought we would end up there. So we just kept walking in that direction, and we one day landed in Papua New Guinea. Yeah.
And what was kind of your first role? How did you plug in there?
Okay, so when you're first on the field, you live on like a mission base, right? Like, there's different words for them, like a compound or a center, but it's basically a big fence around a bunch of houses where all these missionaries live. And those are the missionaries who work kind of behind the scenes. So that's your pilots and your mechanics and your school teachers and principals and the people that are working in the office and working in finances and working in supply, the people who go get all the food and the paper and all the supplies you need and stuff like that. And so it's like the administrative hub of a region, right? And so when you're a new missionary, you'll end up living in a little house or a little apartment in a place like that. And each field is different, but at least this is what New Guinea was like when we were there. And then your job is to learn the things you need to learn in order to live there, like how do you get a driver's license, where do you go shopping, where do you not go shopping, and then learning the local language. So in Papua New Guinea, that would be Melanesian Pidgin. If you were like in South America, you'd be learning Spanish or Portuguese, depending on the country. And then once you've finished those language checks and been given the okay to start into ministry, then you would then you'd be looking toward the ministry that you're going to have, whether it's a ministry there on the base, like if you've come to be a school teacher or to be a pilot or mechanic or any kind of thing like that. And if you're wanting to be on a church planting team, then you would be looking at the different ongoing church planting locations within your region in that country. And if they need coworkers, or if they're looking for coworkers, or for if you're really lucky and adventurous and up for a challenge, you're looking for a new location where church planters haven't been, but where they're wanting to send people. Our organization works in teams. So you need at least 3 units. A unit would be like a family unit, like a husband and wife, and then another unit could be like 2 single guys or 2 single ladies. But we work in, hopefully, the goal is to work in a 3-unit team. Yeah.
What's the motivation for that?
Motivation for that is to try to get the job done.
Yeah.
So with a unit of 3, you have coworkers you can bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
We're the body of Christ, and each one of us are a different part of that body, right? So you're going to have people that are gifted in different areas that you're not. You can have, game nights on Friday and have it in your own language, or at least, in close to your own culture, right? And it allows for furloughs, it allows for sickness, it allows for people having to go home for different reasons. And then, if you start out with at least 3 units, then you have a much higher chance of getting the job done. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, I think. I think that would be super important, even just helping adjusting into a totally new culture and just having some people there. So what was it like then for you guys? What's like an example of how you dealt with this new culture? Like, how are you guys able to adjust to then living in Papua New Guinea?
Oh, yeah. There's some pretty big adjustments, obviously. I remember we had only been there for like a couple of days, and our youngest son, he comes in the house and he's got red stuff around his lips and a big handful of flowers that he had been eating.
Oh no.
Yeah, I know, right? And we're like, "What do you have in your mouth?" And, I don't know. There's these flowers, and the kid said I could eat them.
Good.
And I want Joan smacked the flowers out of his hands and no, don't put anything in your mouth. What are you doing? We have no idea what's going. There are poisonous butterflies in Papua New Guinea, and our son is stuffing these weird flowers in his mouth and saying how great they are. So we thought for sure he was going to die. Multiple times we thought he was going to die while he was over there. So yeah, there's a lot to get used to. Big culture shocks and things like that. That wasn't really the hardest part. There's always culture shock and why do they do things like that? And I can't believe what I saw today. That's crazy. But you kind of expect that, or at least you should, right? Like if you're moving to a place you've never been,
Sure.
and the culture there is so vastly different from what you're familiar to, and like if it wasn't a surprise, somebody didn't kidnap you and blindfold you and put you on a plane and drop you off in this place, right? So you knew you were going there. So we were ready for that. We were prepared for that part of the process. We were prepared to see weird things and weird customs and things that we couldn't explain or understand why, right? Honestly, the hardest thing, like the culture shock that we experienced more than anything was working with our coworkers. Yeah, it was living on a base is hard. It's like you guys. I haven't gotten the full tour yet. That's coming up later. But how many people work here in Sunset?
About 25, maybe in the building.
Okay,
maybe
about
40
25?
to 50.
Okay,
outside
yeah,
too.
that's comparable. Okay, so imagine you guys work here and you live here as well with your family, and you never leave this parking lot. You can go outside this building, but you're not going down the road. You're not going down to the Casey's around the corner, right? And you're here every day, day after day after day. Can you see where there might be some issues and some conflicts? Because it's, you can love everybody that you work with, right? And you can be on the same team, which we were, but still there's going to be clashes and, different thoughts on different things. And you can't go home, drive to the next town where you live. You're stuck there with them all the time, right? And so you have to make things work. And sometimes things that aren't that big a deal end up growing into being very big deals. Yeah.
That's difficult. I don't know, I'm not going to give a statistic. I just, from word of mouth, I've heard that one of the reasons missionaries end up leaving the field is because of these interpersonal conflicts. It's just
often it is.
it's difficult. So how do you, what wisdom do you have with dealing with things like that, those kind of situations?
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard because of pride, because of the feeling of, I've studied this for a long time. I've worked for this for a long time, struggled to get here. And then you get here and it's not what you expected it was going to be.
Yeah.
I'm sure, I was probably somebody else's story. They're like, oh, there was this Tim Carmichael guy over there. Oh man, this guy got on my every last nerve, right? I think it's just it's the stress of living closely together in a stressful situation. Yeah. So one of the podcasts that I heard from your season 1. It was an older gentleman that was in Africa. I think it was the guy that was in Africa. And he talked about one of the most important things and the hardest thing is praying for your coworkers and getting along with them. And it was loving your coworkers. Yeah, I believe it was when he was on his way to Africa and he asked, hey, what's something I'm gonna have a hard time with? And an older missionary had told him, loving your coworkers might be hard.
Yeah.
So if you could love them well, that would be a very big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So what did it look like then? You're on this base. There's like 20 plus people there or something. What does your day-to-day look like as you plugged in? What were you guys assigned? Did you guys, or how did that even maybe evolve? I don't know.
Yeah. So I can say this right off the start. They did a great job, but they're just really doing an awesome job now for new missionaries coming to the field. Back at that time, you showed up whenever you flew there, right? You bought tickets and you go over there and there you are. Now they have things just so well structured. We got there and it was kind of like, they knew we were coming and they knew we had, they had a place for us, but there wasn't a whole lot of structure as far as what to do next, right? Like after the initial things, getting your driver's license, going to see what town looks like, what stores to shop at, how you get the money, all that kind of stuff. And then comes language learning, language and culture learning, right? So it takes about 6 to 8 months to learn Melanesian Pidgin and get the okay to start your ministry. But it just, there wasn't a whole lot of structure to it. It was, I was brought to the neighboring village, which was about a 20-minute walk away, and introduced to this guy, and he became my friend. He was going to be my language helper, and I didn't find out until like a year later. The guy that introduced me to him, he said, "Yeah, I've always kind of felt bad about introducing you to that guy. He's really hard to understand. I don't know if he had like a." Anyway, he was hard to understand. Even for the people that he lived with, he was kind of hard to understand. So it wasn't a clear speaker. So probably not the best person that I that I would have had for learning language. And I was not a good language learner anyway. But anyway, so it seemed a little haphazard. I remember there was an old sorry, my brain just stopped working. Not an older guy, but a guy who's been on the field for long, a seasoned missionary. That's the word I'm looking for. So there was a seasoned missionary whose job was to help us as we learned our Melanesian Pidgin. And we were in his office one day, and he had a Pidgin to English dictionary. And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome!" He pulled it out and he showed it to us and stuff. And I said, "Wow, that's awesome." He says, "Yeah." He says, "They're out of print, but you can usually find them if you end up in the Capitol. So next time you go to the Capitol, you should pick one up if you can find one, right?" And I was like, "Well, can I just borrow this one?" And he said, "Oh, no. I don't loan that out." And I'm like, "Okay, so it's going to be like thousands of dollars to get to the Capitol. Next time I see the Capitol is probably when we're going home." And yeah, I thought that was kind of weird.
Oh man.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah,
Could you
and I get it.
Use it in his office or something? Come by.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It was things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they were doing the best they could,
Sure.
but I don't think there was a lot of planning in it. But what I found out now, like they've got it squared away. All the new missionaries go to the field at the same time, so everybody's arriving at the same time. So you have a class of people. and they've got it structured. They've got somebody who's going to take you out into the village and show you different things and let you see cultural differences and helping you as you're learning the language and all of that stuff. They got it buttoned up. So yeah, these new missionaries, they got it made.
So you talked earlier about being, a truck driver and kind of a logistics focused guy. Is that what you were doing there in PNG as well? Is that what you were focused on?
No, we went there in order to be in a tribe. Okay. I wanted to be like the guy I saw in the video in junior high. And so in the as we were trying to learn the Melanesian language, the national language there, we got plugged into the school and taught some classes in the elementary school, and then worked on maintenance and worked in the carpentry shop and things like that, and just kind of looking and waiting to find out what our ministry was going to be. Yeah, and it was slow going, and so eventually we were asked to go and fill in on another island in Papua New Guinea, a smaller island that had a small center or small mission base, like the one I've been describing. And by small, I mean instead of like 20 families, there's one family that runs this. It's on a piece of property that's about half the size of a football field. It does have a fence, and then there's two houses. One house was made of bricks about the size of a garage. The Aussies built it just before the war. And then there's a 2-story building, a house right next to the, on the other side of the driveway, where missionaries can stay when they come out of their bush locations, right? So a bush location would be like out in the village, right? And this particular location, there were 5 tribal teams in that region, right? Miles and miles apart from each other, but still
on
in
the
that
island.
Region. Either on that island or on neighboring islands that they would take a boat to, right? So this is in the province of New Ireland, is the name of the island. So they needed somebody who lived close to town who could get the supplies that they needed, everything from pens and papers and ink for your printers to toilet paper and food, right? And so for a long time they had a couple who did that job. There's been numerous missionaries who've stepped into that role, and then they couldn't find anybody. And when they can't find anybody to run that supply center, the missionary teams would take turns going out, right? So they would leave their tribal location, whether it was out on an island or whether it was halfway down our island up in the mountains, and they would leave that location and then come and run the supply base for a month or two, right? To get everybody else's supplies. Now, the problem with that is whichever team volunteers or is on the rotation to go and watch the center, all the work stops. Right? So if you're teaching literacy stops, right? If you're in the middle of Bible translation, you're not going to be doing anything, right? And, man, the awful thing would be if you had to step out in the middle of the teaching, right? So they need somebody there. And so we were asked to fill in for about 6 weeks, and we said, okay, we'll do that. It'd be cool. It'd be nice to see another place, go to another island. And so we agreed to do that. And then it wasn't until later that I learned one of the big things, not just in missions, but in any kind of ministry, when you say okay to step in for a short time, find out who your replacement is. Like, get that person's name and when they're coming. So those 6 weeks stretched into a couple of years, and but it was a good ministry for us. It was lonely. It's not a whole lot out there. It's a tiny little town, but beautiful, and a lot safer than other places in New Guinea. Yeah, and we lived there, just the 4 of us. Our 2 boys had a blast. Got to do all kinds of stuff. Hung out with their neighbors. They know how to cut things down with a bush knife, and they know how to travel by dugout canoe, and how to swim under the water and spear fish, and how to make a fire when you don't have matches and cook the fish. And they had a cool time.
I mean, you're essentially supporting and helping those 5 teams that were distributed. And that's crucial. I mean, you're holding kind of the line that's keeping them alive for one. I mean, keeping them supplied, keeping them effective. I mean, allowing them to do the work they need to do. Do you have any experiences maybe that came to mind as you were in pretty constant communication with these teams? You were hearing from them.
They would come up on radio 3 times a day, and
What was happening there? I mean, what types of experiences were they having as you guys were part of supporting them and enabling them to be there?
Oh, there's so many stories, good and bad. You know, there were teams that were going through struggles with the people that they were living with. There's some issues of jealousy. We had a team that was struggling with, they had been with this one people group for a long time. The church had been established and was struggling as a church. And basically just because of jealousy and family squabbles within the tribe, the missionaries kept getting kicked out of there. And then they'd come and they'd live with us for a while. And then they'd go back up the mountain, and they'd be there for a short time, and then they'd show up at our gate again in the truck with all their stuff. And see, the thing is, even back before they had somebody to manage that place, when all the missionary teams were taking turns, it's not like you just leave your house and lock the door, right? Because your house is in this really remote location, right? So you'd have to board up every window with plywood and drive-in screws. You'd have to basically try to fortify your house in such a way that people couldn't break in and take everything, right? Usually it'd be kids doing that sort of thing, but still it makes a mess and you end up losing all your food or whatever, right? Getting stuff stolen from you. So there's that. And the exact same thing would happen when this family, and well, not just the family, but the whole team would get kicked out of that tribe. People would get upset. They'd start fighting and fussing, and then, it wasn't safe for them to be in there anymore. So then you have to pack up everything you have, all your school supplies for your homeschooling, your kids, all the things, all the notes that you've taken in your, Bible translation work or in your Bible lessons that you're doing, all of that stuff has to be packed up and then put in the truck and then driven about 4 or 5 hours to get to where we are. And, it's a hassle. Yeah. So they're dealing with things like that. They're dealing with, all the same kind of things that we deal with in the church here. It's just a much higher stress situation, right? So you have this brand new baby infant church, they only had a chance to hear the gospel just a few years ago, and there's so much that they don't know yet, right? And you're trying to disciple them, and you're trying to work with them, but yeah, they're believers, but they're also human believers. Right. And so the same kind of jealousy and arguments and, things like that come up in the church, they have the same things and usually for different reasons. But it's hard.
Yeah. You think about that. Yeah. Even in scripture, right. You see it like in the Corinthian church or, Paul recent church plant but people are messy and there's difficult things that come up.
Yeah. If Paul was over there when we were there, I know a couple of places that would have gotten a letter.
Oh boy. You guys were there in Papua New Guinea 5 years, little less than 5 years. And, maybe in the moments too, it's kind of hard to see certain things and how the Lord's working. But even in hindsight, looking back, what's an example of where you saw God's hand at work in Papua New Guinea?
Oh man. Like there's so many. Definitely the highlight. There were 2 different tribes that came to Christ during the time that we were there. We played a very, very, very minuscule part in that, but still to have been there at the time when that happened was amazing. That was great. There's in our own lives, there were times when we're facing danger. And we saw God work and move, and remove that danger from us and protect us from things. There was, oh man, there was a time when our youngest, the one who ate the flowers,
Yep.
yeah, and he got really, really sick, and we were really worried about him, and we couldn't afford a flight on the mission plane to get him up to this other island where the doctor was, and there was a couple of days where we were really scared and wondering and all this kind of stuff, and the Lord worked in so many different ways in getting us out of there and getting the help that he needed. There was we dealt with when we were on the other island with the where we were running the center on our own, constant break-ins all the time, and like scary situations. We never had any violent thing happen to us, but the former managers of that center did, and they were very good friends of ours. And then after we had left, just here in recent years, there was a attack on the house that we lived in there, and there was violence that was done to the missionaries there, which breaks my heart because they're the absolute sweetest, best people who love the people of Papua New Guinea and have served there for decades, and it breaks my heart what they went through. So we had some scary moments. We also had some fun times. There was down the road from us, I don't know, maybe 100 yards, 200 yards or so. The people would meet once a week. I can't remember if it was Mondays or Tuesdays, but there was a local meeting, like a local government leadership, and it's something typical to that place in Papua New Guinea, where everybody would get together, and you would have this like local politician, basically, kind of like for like that ward, right? And he would share the news. He would share things that he'd heard from the capital, any kind of big news, like globally. And then they would discuss local things, right? And and then they would do like community service, right? And this was, they don't pay taxes the same way we do here. So part of your obligation to the government is to go to these meetings. And if you don't show up, you owe like a quarter, right? Like a coin, and they have a log with everybody's name. And so we started going to those meetings, right? We walked past them and we'd see all these people sitting there, and we're wondering what that was. And so once we figured out who they were, we started going to those meetings. And then I said, hey, you read everybody's names off. You never mentioned us. And they, oh, well, you're not on this list. I'm like, well, we're living in your neighborhood. You should put us on the list. And that lady thought it was the funniast thing. And she said, okay, I'm going to put it on the list. But if you don't show up, you have to pay your coin. I'm like, well, I mean, some days we'll be busy, but I'll make sure to pay the coin. And what's really cool about it is their community service was kind of like them paying their taxes. So one of the things that they had to do, that they were required to do, was to mow the grass on the side of the highway. There's one highway on this whole island, right? You drive it, you go to the end, you've seen everything there is to see, and you turn around and come back, right? And so they're not using lawnmowers, right? You're using like a bush knife. And so anytime there was a work day, we grabbed our bush knife and we went out there and we worked with those guys, right? There's about 30, 40 people, mostly elderly, and we're walking and we're cutting down the grass. And our house had a metal roof, right? And we were kind of close to the street, to that highway, right? The one highway. And by highway, I mean like 2-lane, tiny little.
Sure.
yeah, tiny little road. Anyway, so the kids in the neighborhood, they would have the absolute best time finding the roundest rock they could find and throw it onto our metal roof, because it made a big bang, and then it banged all the way down as it rolled down the metal roof.
Man.
So that would happen all the time as soon as it got dark and early in the morning. And one of the cool things was after we started going to those meetings once a week, this like grandmother came by and she says, "Hey, are those boys throwing rocks on your roof still? You let me know, because I told them you don't mess with Tim and Joan. Tim and Joan are good people. They're our neighbors. We love them. Quit throwing rocks on their roof."
Wow.
And we could have gone out and like yelled at the kids, "Hey, quit throwing rocks."
Yeah.
But like if I was a kid growing up in New Guinea and there was this
Sure.
white guy telling me not to throw rocks, I'm going to be throwing rocks like all the time, right?
That's right.
But the grandma took care
That's
of it.
cool. You're
Yeah.
starting to integrate in the community, and they were
Yeah.
watching out for you guys too.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's
And
super.
This really, really old person came up, and he was there when the war was going on, World War II. So that's how old he was. And he came up and he said, they call it line. Everybody gets up in a line for those meetings. And he said, I've been here my whole life. He said, I have never seen somebody from another place. I've never seen a foreigner, show up to these meetings and put their name on the list. Yeah.
Wow. I just think about, the spiritual work. Like, it's a spiritual work that you guys were doing, and this opposition that y'all were facing, and that the teams that were out in the region were facing, and even maybe bridging kind of to the present day in your current role as a mobilizer. Just really curious, how do you stay spiritually refreshed and connected to the Lord? I mean, we read, John 15, that unless we're abiding in Christ, we're not going to bear fruit. And apart from Him, we can do nothing. I mean, how do you stay spiritually refreshed even today as you're pouring into and investing in spiritually so many?
Yeah. I'd love to say that I stay spiritually refreshed all the time, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get tired and get frustrated, and all the things that I'm sure you guys that happens with
Absolutely.
you guys. We listen to a lot of teaching on I almost said radio. I'm an older guy. So we listen to a lot of podcasts. Our church that we attend down in Knoxville, great teaching. So there's that. But it is hard because we're in churches and youth groups and colleges and all kinds of things like that all the time. And because we've been doing this for quite a while, we have a lot of relationships with people in the church and people in ministry, but the majority of them are about this thin because we only see them every once in a while.
Yeah.
Sometimes every few years, right? Or just once or twice a year. So we have a wide pool of friends and coworkers, ministry partners, that sort of thing. But because we're always on the move, the relationship always seems just kind of shallow.
Yes.
Not that we're shallow as people, but just if you only see somebody every once in a while.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's that part of it is makes it lonely. It makes it hard to learn new things, how to keep up on things, and it's just we have a lot of friends, but only a few close friends.
Sure. And so really, really investing and spending time with those. How do you spend time with those close friends? Because you're always on the road, even around the weekends when you would normally be in your church in Knoxville. You're speaking in a church in Illinois, or you're here in Elkhart, Indiana at a church here. So how do you maintain those friendships with those close friends?
Well, the close friends are going to be people that we've known for years, either from our home church and or from missionaries that were friends of ours in New Guinea. Our missionary friends are the absolute best because we can share stories with them that they understand that nobody else understands. We can commiserate with them. We can share things that we would never share in a church, this one missionary was such a big jerk, blah, 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 like that, but they've been there and done it, and they understand. And, you can say those kind of things with them. And those relationships are precious. But the majority of time we're in places where where we are very familiar to people, where they're like, "Oh, Tim and Joan," and then I have to try to remember who these people are and how, yeah, it's a challenge.
Sure. Sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, really appreciate even just seeing because I know it can be hard, but seeing your guys' faithfulness in many years serving in ministry. I mean, how many years now have you been with Ethnos?
With Ethnos?
Or in missions,
man, I don't
or in
know.
ministry? Yeah.
Well, I count it all the way back to 97 or 98. That was when we walked away from our jobs and we went to a Bible college of all places and plopped down a stack of $100 bills that we had saved up in order to pay somebody for me to do schoolwork.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Almost 30 years.
It's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
though, and I know it's not always easy, and there's discouraging times. I mean, I'm hitting my 10-year milestone here at Sunset.
Oh, congratulations.
And
That's awesome.
That's not even, it's only a third of what you guys spent in ministry, and you see tough times and mentally different tough situations, but to see you faithfully following the Lord, because there is more to this life, right? There's eternity, and there's people in need of the gospel.
Yeah.
And that supersedes sometimes these trials that we're going through and difficult times. You have a lot of opportunities to speak at churches. You're talking to a lot of young people, youth. You're talking to just a lot of wide audiences. But what's something that you're seeing maybe in the next generation, those who you're talking to about missions, some encouraging things, maybe some challenges they're facing? Any examples you have in that?
Yeah. So the state of missions worldwide is not as good as it used to be. I don't know if that's the situation here at Sunset, but in most mission organizations, there are fewer missionaries than there have been in the past. Fewer people stepping into the role of missionary than what we used to see. I've heard stories from the older reps that they used to be able to travel across the country and literally pull into a church on a Wednesday night or a Sunday night and say, "Hey, I'm a missionary with New Tribes. Can I speak?" And not even having ever seen the guy there, like, yeah, come on in, right? And the guy gets up, and then there's people in there that, okay, I'll go be a missionary, right? Yeah, I don't think that's happened in quite a while. I'm told that the majority of mission organizations are losing people fast, just because of retirement, mandatory retirement in most cases. But having said that, and despite all the things that we're told about this next generation, this younger generation, that they don't have the patience for long-term missions, which is what we do. I mean, we do short-term trips and stuff, but the majority, our reason for existing is to invest a lot of time in a people group in order to establish a church that's going to last. And we're told that this generation is not going to have the patience to do that. They're not going to give up those many years of their lives to see that happen. And yet, despite that, and despite the lousy job that me and Joan oftentimes end up doing in trying to mobilize these people, God is still sending his people out. And we continue to see young people step up and be willing to take up the challenge and to do a hard work in a hard place, in a place where most people don't ever want to go to, wouldn't even want to go to visit for a short time. And they're not only willing to do that, but they are investing their time and their money and their lives in training in order to get the chance to get that done. Yeah, so we continue to see that happen. Yeah, not in great numbers, but I mean, isn't that kind of like his thing? No. I mean, I'm amazed that the Lord was even willing to use me. Right. And I was telling somebody yesterday, this pastor that we just met yesterday, who had a very similar story to mine, that I know there's somebody out there that would be a much better mobilizer than Tim Carmichael, right? But that person must have said no. All we've done every step of the way from when we first went to Bible college was we saw an open door and we stepped through it. Like absolutely certain at some point somebody's going to be like, oh, no, not you guys, bless your heart. You're like, thanks for trying, but that's not it. And I know that there's a lot of young people like that. And I think we're going to see some more from the things that I'm hearing. In recent months.
So how would you encourage that person who's listening right now and thinking, even putting yourself back in your early shoes, thinking similar thoughts to what you had, like, oh, that's missions, that's for somebody else, or I kind of feel the call, but I don't know if I can do it. How would you encourage that person?
I would encourage them just to keep going. Keep going until somebody like actually stops you. Because that never happened to us. And I thought that it would. I never thought the Lord could use a guy like me. And he has for whatever reason. So I think it's more about a willingness. I think if you're willing to do what he wants you to do, and you look for those doors that he opens, and sometimes you might need to bang on that door a little bit. I'm convinced that he can use anybody. I mean, if he can use me, there's definitely, he could use anybody if you have a willingness.
Just think about what you've shared in your story, willingness. You talked about being involved in your church, even just the 7th and 8th grade girls, just teaching, just helping, cleaning bathrooms, you said, right? I mean, just being involved. You demonstrated that willingness to serve the church. I think that's a really, really good first step as well. And pressing on, continuing to serve the local church, as you said, continuing to take that next step of obedience and look for that open door, walk through it. Yeah. Walk through it, see what God does.
Yeah.
One of the last questions we like to ask here is, what kind of resources have helped you in ministry? Maybe books, podcasts. I mean, you mentioned, mentoring and the benefits of having folks invest in you. You talked about Dave Myers, the previous missionary, but are there particular books or resources that come to mind as you think about how you benefited early on in ministry and even today?
Okay, so like probably the biggest influence was that video. It's called ETOW.
ETOW.
It can be found online. You can find a shortened version of it called The Mouk Story. That's the name of the people.
Can you spell those two?
MOUK.
And then the ETOW.
That's the name of the people group. And then ETOW is EE and then a little hyphen TAOW. Yeah.
Great.
ETOW. Yeah.
ETOW.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah,
if I was on
it's
the
a great
spot, I'd
one.
be, I don't know if I'd be able to spell that.
Yeah. And then there's an ETOW too. They're both really dated. They're pretty old videos, but it's a great story.
Very good.
Yeah.
Tim, thank you. This has been really good. So encouraged to hear the stories, the testament to God's faithfulness, walking with you through this. Really appreciate you sharing this.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.